What is the peculiarity of the Russian principle of building statehood and accordingly identity? Identity is what unites us. Look at the history of Russia. What is our first Russes like? Ladoga. What is Ladoga Russes?
This just a little bit more.
Just a little bit. The capital is Ladoga. Nearby is the Karela fortress. The population, more than half of it, were Karelians, Finno-Ugric peoples. So the main population of Ladoga Russes were not even Slavs. Because sometimes people say Russes and Slavs are the same thing. No, these are different principles, right? So Ladoga Rus was being formed. Ladoga Rus developed certain principles of state building. These principles spread to Novgorod Russes and then to Kievan Russes. Later, after fading for a while, they were revived in the form of the Moscow Tsardom, which expanded to the scale of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, that is, from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. In other words, the very principles that were established turned out to be better than those of their neighbors. The Ottoman Empire, the Empire of Tamerlane the Lame, the German empires, Charlemagne's Empire, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and so on. The principles were better. That is, the model of state building proved to be more effective in terms of results. The result is territory.
So it turns out that it's not even the ethnicity that's most important, but rather the model. The same Finno-Ugric peoples, they're actually ethnically related to the Hungarians. Right. It's just that the Hungarians are over there, and these ones are here. Well,
you see, it depends on the principles of state building. The Russian principle of state building has been, from the very beginning, multinational and multi-confessional. Russia is both a state and a civilization in one. What distinguishes a civilization? They differ in the principles of their formation. This is the principle of defensive statehood. What does that mean? In this territory, unlike in England or Germany or China, it so happened that this land is in the middle, and as a result, it was constantly under pressure, with others trying to tear pieces away from it. Well, that makes sense. After all, it's the competition of nations. So, from the west, from the east, well, except maybe from the north, right? There were constant raids, people being taken captive, land being seized, various invasions. And so, the peoples who lived here, in order to survive, developed a formula for a unique form of statehood. What was this formula? We are different. We speak different languages. We have different faiths. But what unites us is that we want to live together. We just want to survive. And to survive, we need to be together.
So it's a necessity?
It's a necessity from the standpoint of survival. And for that, we set aside our differences and unite into a single statehood. And this statehood, as the next step, creates a state apparatus to ensure survival, the army, the police, state protection, and so on. And the army needs a single language. Right?
Yes.
And so a second level of identity emerges in the form of language. So the first level is defensive and protective. We all want to be in the same bomb shelter. The second level is that we've created a state apparatus that speaks a single language. That language turned out to be Russian. That's why the Russian language is not the language of some single tribe or a single people that existed before, but rather a language that emerged from state building. In other words, it's a kind of composite language of state building. And in fact, this is the second identity. And this identity also extends to the historical concept of Russians. It is very clearly defined in the 1897 census. Any viewer can look it up and see how the concept of Russian differed for those who lived back in 1897 and participated in the census with their own signature. There were 120 million people at that time. A Russian is someone who speaks Russian from birth. That's it. That's the only criterion. Yes, that person might also be of the Orthodox faith, but they might not be. So the census refers to different concepts. There is the concept of faith, there is the concept of languages and the word Russian as an adjective for the language, and then there are economic conditions and many, many other things. There were 16 items in that census. This is the mechanism of identity that was originally created. And the entire state structure was built around it. This mechanism, I emphasize, is different from others. What are its strengths and weaknesses, so to speak? Its strength lies in the fact that it allows for very rapid expansion, both in terms of territory, because any territory can easily adapt to this state mechanism that emerges on in terms of population size. That is, accordingly, the population can grow rapidly because identity is not formed in the same way, for example, among the Germans. This was formalized in the form of Reich laws under Hitler. These were laws, I emphasize, that were not invented at that time. Rather, they describe the previous historical experience of German state building. It was written there that a German is someone, an Aryan, who has Germans in 7 generations. You see, that's the principle of blood. The Russian principle, on the other hand, is the principle of culture.
Language.
And by culture, what is meant is, first and foremost, language.
The fundamental part of culture.
Moreover, from the legal point of view, it's the language of birth. That is, if a child says their first word, like mama, in Russian, according to the principles of Russian state building, they are considered Russian. The Soviet Union was the heir to the most humane principle of state building, from the competitive struggle, because it was a defensive, protective form of statehood. That is, Russia and the Soviet Union, especially the Russian Empire, built their policies in such a way as not to seize other territories for colonial exploitation. So, when territories joined the Russian Empire, sometimes vast territories, it wasn't about acquiring colonies, but about expanding for the security of a strong state and for powerful competitive struggle. For example, why did Georgia and Armenia become part of it? Because the Ottoman Empire had different principles of state building. The principles of the Russian Empire allowed people to live, develop, and even join the country's elite like Bagration, for example, who became a general, right? So the development went in a different direction. Not the internal development of Armenia or Georgia, but towards expansion becoming part of the elite of an entire empire. By the way, when Georgia joined, the number of nobles, the number of princes in the Russian Empire increased by 1/3.
Well, there's a joke that over there, every third person is a prince.
And yet they were recognized. And the status of prince was all Russian, not just Georgian. But that was the principle of organization. That was the mechanism.